You're listening to Truth to Power Live with Dumisani Washington. Truth to Power Live with Dumisani Washington. I'm your host, Dumisani Washington. Great to be with you on this Sunday, December the 1st, first day of December 2024, last month of the year. Great to be with you all. We're going to pick up, I guess, from where we left off on last week, but great to have you all here with us on this podcast, on this sometimes radio show. We talk about the Bible, music, politics, culture, the Black American community, current events, geopolitics, Israel, Africa, marriage, family, education, and everything in between. I hope you all had a great Thanksgiving holiday. Those of you who celebrate, especially in the U.S., and some of you who are expatriates out there in the U.S. who are all over the world, and then our friends all over the world who wish us well during that time as well. Hope everybody had a great time. I am just loading up a couple of things here. So I want to say right off the bat that this, when I say pick up where we left off, this is episode 24. We are like almost halfway through the year. We started on Sunday, Father's Day, third Sunday in June. And now we're almost halfway through the year of this inaugural year of Truth to Power Live. Great to be with you all. You can go to ttplive.com, ttplive.com. You can check out the past episodes. They're on podcast. It's pretty much everywhere, Apple as well. For those who are looking for it on Spotify, there are issues with it. I mean, not with Spotify. There's something that's not connecting right, and I need my staff to still check that out. So my apologies. But if you go to ttplive.com and you scroll to listen to all episodes, click on that. On the Podbean website are all 23 episodes. The 24th will be up there sometime tonight or tomorrow. But episode 16 is the reason I'm mentioning that, and then see if I can actually share with you the thumbnail to it, everything. It's episode 16. Ta-Nehisi Coates joins the Black for Palestine deception. We're picking up from there, although it was several weeks ago, because we have some other things we need to discuss here on today. I want to also say this right off the bat. I need to, in a moment, we'll talk about Ta-Nehisi Coates, the author, his latest book, which I've already talked about. If you have to go to episode 16, you can check it out a little bit more in depth. I'm not going to go into all to that, but I'm mentioning him and Coates-Farrakhan because we need to talk about something that happened back in 1996 that's very, very relevant for today, right? So we're going to come to that in just a moment. So the first thing, other than opening up and saying hello and go to ttplive.com, and you also, when you go on ttplive.com, you'll also see the links for the YouTube page, the Rumble page, X. Right now, when you click on watch or listen live, it takes you to the X page. So if you did that from the TTP Live website, welcome. Great to have you. You can see the X page because originally it took you to the radio station feed coming out of New York. We're not doing that at the moment. The radio feeds will resume a little bit later on, probably sometime after the first of the year. But for now, we're doing it just on other social media and everything. We're having conversations with others. So absolutely. So I just want to let you know about that. So I want to start off this conversation. This is another teaching moment. The reason why we discuss all these different topics here, well, these are things that are near and dear to my heart. But the Bible is the first thing I often mention because as a pastor and as a minister, I mean, I'll see it through the lens, as most ministers do, religious people do, rabbis will see it through the lens of life events, through the lens of Scripture, through the lens of maybe the Holy Spirit. We in other words, we tend to, or attempt to, glean the spiritual principle that's actually being touched on, or that's being unfolded while we're watching the physical thing happen. So I want to do this first of all. So along with other things that I do, I'm the founder and the CEO of the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel. If you want to know about IBSI, go to ibsi.org. I'll mention that a couple of times because this is not an IBSI. It's not an IBSI or Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel venture. However, that is one of the hats that I wear, as well as pastor, husband, father, author, musician, that type of thing. So I'm mentioning that because some of this will meld quite a bit with IBSI's mandate to strengthen the tie between Israel and Africa and the Black and Jewish communities. The latest, or one of the latest pieces in our Substack, which is called Africa Israel Weekly, you see it there. African women refuse to join the lynch mob against Israel. So you go to ibsi.org. You can click on Africa Israel Weekly, that very logo that you see there, or you go to ibsi.substack.com. It's amazing that this particular article is the most shared to date in the IBSI, in our Substack. It's still relatively new, maybe a year or so old, maybe 2 years, I'm not sure. Thank you for all who subscribe. You can subscribe for free. Obviously, you can also do the premium. There are some things coming up for our premium content subscribers. So shout out to all of you. We know we have a special event coming up in a couple of weeks, but African women refuse to join the lynch mob against Israel. So now I'm not going to read a clip from it or anything, I'm mentioning it to you for this reason. Both the UN representative, who is from Kenya, and also one of the justices of the International Court of Justice, she is from Uganda. Over the past few months, the Kenyan young lady just a few days ago, and then the Ugandan judge on the ICJ several months ago, back during the summer, both of them made headlines, so to speak, because of their integrity. The UN advisor refused to condemn what Israel is doing in Gaza as genocide because it's not genocide. The ICJ, International Criminal Court Justice, refused to condemn Israel as occupying because Israel's not occupying. They're specifically talking about Gaza and the war that's there and everything. So you can go and you can click on that link. Again, here's the article, because on that article, ibsi.substack.com or ibsi.org, and go to Africa Israel Weekly, I encourage you to read it, because the links that are provided there also give more context, particularly of the justice that's from Uganda, because one of our senior staff members, Olga Mashwe Washington, she's a South African national, also my daughter-in-law, she breaks down, and she's also an attorney, breaks down the legal ruling and the reason why the Ugandan judge refused to jump on the hate Israel bandwagon. Now, and the same thing with the Kenyan advisor who's with the United Nations, she refused to jump on the anti-Israel bandwagon. Why? Why do they do it? Because they love Israel? I don't know what their religious leanings are. I do know that Sub-Saharan Africa is one of, and soon to be, the largest Christian population in the world, according to Pew Center research. By 2060, some say long before then, most of the world's Christians will be in Africa, and then the second one will be Latin America. The Christian population, for many reasons, is shrinking in the West. It's growing in places like Africa and Latin America. And so they're also some of the most devout Christians in Africa. So what we're saying is that that may be very well this part of these ladies' ethos. I don't know them. I've never met them before. And what I say in the article, as you read it, is that neither of them made a ruling that refused to condemn Israel that was based on their affinity for Israel, their pro-Israel stance, quote unquote. They made the ruling based on the actual facts and the evidence at hand. And I made the comment, and also said it there in the article as well, that they are modern day Shifra and Puah. Who are Shifra and Puah? Those of you who know your Bible. Those are the two Hebrew midwives in the book of Exodus, chapter 1. I first said chapter 2. I made a mistake, chapter 1. In which the Pharaoh decides that because there are too many Hebrews, because they're having too many children, and because too many children, right? Because children are an inheritance from the Lord. Talk about that later. And they're growing so quickly, Pharaoh preempts anything because nothing negative has happened, but he decides that the Hebrews are too many in number and that they might one day rise up against them. It's the original protocols of the Elders of Zion. Here you have the Pharaoh who begins to oppress the Hebrews, oppress the Israelites, not because they've done something, but because he's concerned that one day they might do something, right? This is the beginning. Before there was a Hitler, before there was a Stalin, before there was the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, there was the Pharaoh who decided he would oppress the Hebrews who had done nothing to him. As a matter of fact, the Hebrews' ancestor, Joseph, had saved his hide and the entire kingdom, the entire empire of Egypt. So anyway, why am I mentioning that? The sages teach that in that first chapter of Exodus, the Pharaoh goes from one stage to the other in oppressing the Hebrews. He puts them in hard labor and everything. When he recruits the Hebrew midwives, he wants them to kill every baby boy. If the Hebrews have a child and it's a girl, leave her alone. But if it's a boy, why? The procreation. He's the priest of the home. He's the father. It's amazing how that demonic mindset comes after the men. Not because the women aren't important, but because the men, the head, the priest of that house, the protector of the family, you want to dismantle a society, come after them, emasculate the men, make the men confused, tell them that they're women, right? That is the mindset of someone who would want to destroy a society, right? So he says, let's kill all the baby boys. The ladies, the midwives, refuse. And God blesses them for that. But later on, in the same text in Exodus chapter 1, it says that Pharaoh recognizes that they're still having these babies, and he instructs to throw all the babies, to kill all the babies, throw them in the Nile. Now, Rashi, who is one of the vaunted sages within Judaism, points out that in the Hebrew, it does not say throw the Hebrew boys in the Nile. It says throw the boys in the Nile, which may very well mean that Pharaoh killed Hebrew and Egyptian boys because, according to the sages, the magicians told Pharaoh, according to the stars, the Hebrews' Messiah has been born. In other words, their deliverer has come, who we know as Moses. But we cannot determine whether or not he's Hebrew or Egyptian. And to cover his bases, what Rashi actually says is that in this verse, it says he gives instructions for everyone to throw the babies in the Nile. If that was the actual case, it is the beginning of the old adage now, what starts with the Jews never ends with the Jews. It was a starting of oppression of the Hebrews, but later on, because of the maniacal, the mindset of Pharaoh, may very well have killed Egyptians as well to make sure that no one would rival his throne. That what started with the Hebrews may have very well spread to everywhere. We see that principle has played out over the thousands of years. I wanted to say that first because I want to underscore the spiritual nature of what's actually going on here. If you were to check out that episode 16 here, and again, you go to ttplive.com, you'll see it. And you would also, let's see if I can pull this up as well. There's an article also on the Africa Israel Weekly that we did several months ago around that time that focused on the whole Ta-Nehisi Coates book. So he came out with a book. Don't remember the title of it right now. Please forgive me. But in the book, he profiles 3 different geopolitical situations, the third of which, and the longest part of his book, is about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, in which he condemns Israel as an occupying force or as an apartheid state. Now, that's completely wrong. And we actually, again, addressed it several weeks ago. We also addressed the fact that not just on the left and the right, and that's the article there. If I can put it there, Ta-Nehisi Coates joins the Black for Palestine deception. Again, go to ibsi.org and go to Africa Israel Weekly, or you can go to ibsi.substack.com and you can check out that article there. That article, and I wrote that one, I explained that, though I didn't read all the book, I just read the comments about the book and the synopsis of the book on Coates' website, that Coates not only fraudulently accuses Israel of apartheid, he then ignores all of the truly heinous human rights abuses happening right there in that region. And as a Black author who writes consistently about Black issues, he's not my cup of tea. He is a vaunted, world-renowned author in the social justice space. That's just not my space. So, I mean, but his name is known. He was tapped by Stan Lee with the whole Marvel. He did some Black Panther, I believe, comic things. And he also did the whole Miles Morales, some of those, the Spider-Man pieces as well. So he's a well-known within pop culture, within the Black social justice spaces, very well known, right? So I point out in the article several months ago that Coates doesn't address Sudan, slavery, Nigeria, slavery, all kinds of, he doesn't address any of the same thing we said about Black Lives Matter. Oh, we're concerned, Black solidarity to Palestinians. Okay, but what about the Black folks who are actually being slaughtered in Africa? Oh, yeah, whatever. Okay, well, come to find out that a college-age Ta-Nehisi Coates, knew well about what's going on in Africa. And so it brings us to what is the point here. It was Howard University, 1996, and Coates attended Howard University between 1993 and 1999. He's an undergraduate student. And our dear friends Charles Jacobs, who is over the American anti-slavery group, held a forum at Howard University in 1996. Let me show you the video and then we'll go from there. It's a clip. Now, this actual clip, you can find it, the whole video, on YouTube if you type in the right stuff. I didn't put the link here. My apologies. If you're looking at a clip, you'll see the link on there. But this is live right now, so I have the link at the moment. But I want you to check out this clip here if you can. Let me see if I can do it this way. Yeah, here we go. Check this out again. You'll see the caption on the top of it as well.
Are there any other questions? Please.
That's Ta-Nehisi Coates, he's 20-something years old, 1996, Howard University.
Okay. All of the panelists mentioned, or I heard a few of the panelists actually mentioned that they would like African Americans to play a role in the fight against slavery in the Sudan. But recently, in his trip abroad, Louis Farrakhan, who has emerged as an African American leader, it is my understanding, made the comment that slavery did not exist or that it was at a minimal level in the Sudan. Now, the majority or the masses of African Americans don't really have a knowledge of slavery in Mauritania and the Sudan. I know I'm a college student, and it was definitely a surprise to me. So what would be the effect, or how could we combat such a comment by such a leader with, such a high standing among African American people?
Now, you'd have to go back to the episode right before, episode 23, 22. I stop it there because they go on to answer it. They go on to, I'm going to connect it to something else. The panelists consisted of Africans who were African nationals from Sudan, from Mauritania, both Christian and Muslim, who were testifying about the slavery and the genocide that was happening in Mauritania and in the Sudan. Now, context, 1996 is the year after the Million Man March led by Louis Farrakhan, the Nation of Islam, 1995, right, in Washington, D.C. As the leader of the Nation of Islam, it could be stated that arguably his street cred and his name was probably never as well known, Louis Farrakhan, as it was leading up to and shortly post the Million Man March, right? Nearly 30 years ago, right? So not only was it, he assumed leadership, became leader of the Nation of Islam after the passing of Elijah Muhammad. I remember exactly when that was. We already talked, not on this show, but we'll talk some more again about how the heir apparent may have been Malcolm X, but he had fallen out of favor because he began to tell the truth about the Nation of Islam, a bunch of other stuff, and then there was a fatwa put out on him. And whether or not we think that Farrakhan did it or not, he bragged about it. That's another conversation for another day. At one of the Savior's Days, he actually talked about the fact that we dealt with Malcolm like you deal with the traitor, right? So this man, a lot of drama, right? And a lot of negativity, a lot of bad, right? Had done some good, a lot of bad, right? And they don't balance at all. And I said it. Is this on? I'm going to go further. So Louis Farrakhan is holding great sway in the Black American community. Not that he does it now, but probably even more so back then. So a young Ta-Nehisi Coates gets up to the microphone after hearing the testimonies of these African men about what's actually going on. And Coates is aware that Farrakhan has been saying the opposite. Like you heard, there's no slavery in Sudan, or if there is, it's minimal levels. No, these guys got to talk about the millions of slaves and those who are being displaced. Again, this was nearly 30 years ago. We have no record of, and I'm going to say this right how to make sure we cover our bases here. To our knowledge, of course, that Ta-Nehisi Coates goes on to become the vaunted author and the world-renowned pop culture figure that I talked to you about before. And to our knowledge, and we did some research, we don't have any record of Ta-Nehisi Coates ever addressing either in literary form or in by speeches, whatever that's publicly available, ever addressing what he already knew to be true nearly 30 years ago now, is that slavery in Africa at the hands of Arab Islamic slave traders is real. He's known this since college. Let me pause here. Believe it or not, this is not about Coates or Farrakhan or the Nation of Islam. I'm making a point. Oh, we're going to go deeper. This is not about Ta-Nehisi Coates. This is about Louis Farrakhan. This is not, I mean, they're illustrating the fact, you know what? Just like Shifra and Puah, the point of the story of those Hebrew midwives who refused to kill the babies that Pharaoh told them to kill, the point of the story is not those women, or they play a major role. The point of the story is that the God of Israel is the keeper of Israel, and he was able to save, not only deliver the Hebrews from Egypt, he was able to send their deliverer in the person of Moses, whom Pharaoh's daughter raised herself. He sat at the king of Egypt's table, grew strong, and once he fled because he killed one of the Egyptian soldiers, that's a whole story. It's a fascinating story. I've been reading this as a little kid, came back and put the smack down on Pharaoh and led the Hebrews out of bondage. That God is amazing. The point of the story with Shifra and Puah is that God is amazing. The point of this right here is not Ta-Nehisi Coates or Louis Farrakhan. It's about how this deception has been set in and why. Particularly the one that targets the Black American community. Let me pause right here and say something. I am often asked in my role in all the Israel advocacy that we do, Pastor Dumisani, why does it seem, I'm saying it in a more, approachable way right now, that there's so much anti-Semitism in the Black community? The question is distorted, but they'll say, or why does it seem like Black people don't like Israel? Then I always have to answer the same things. Number one, that's not true. The vast majority of Black Americans are not against Israel, are not anti-Semitic. They've measured it, are the measures, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I'm going to try to quote it off the dome. Back in the 1990s, the ADL did a survey about how they checked, I don't know what the questions were, what the levels of anti-Semitism were per ethnic group. I believe the Latino community was around 17%, white was around 14, 15%, and the Black community was around 21, 22%, something like that. It was higher. It wasn't the majority, but it was higher than some of the others. And all those are too high, but higher, right? I'm saying, and I'm gonna say here again, please understand this, everyone. There are many different reasons for the higher levels of it in the Black community. And I really, that would have to be a separate show itself, but let me break something down for you. We'll give you one of them. I've said this many times. There is no, arguably, my opinion, doing this for a long time, ethnic group, particularly in the West, that has been more targeted with anti-Zionist disinformation or anti-Semitic disinformation, particularly since the reestablishment of the State of Israel, than the Black American community. The KGB established the Palestine Liberation Organization as a PSYOP to actually put not just Yasser Arafat's, the Islamist Nazi goal of destroying Israel and the Jewish people. They made it that's why they chose liberation, to liberate people all the time. The PLO was formed in 1964. Israel, other than that little strip of land, didn't even have access to the Judea and Samaria. They didn't even have access to Jerusalem until 1967. So what were they liberating? It was for the purpose of destroying Israel. And they couldn't do it by might. They tried. So they tried it by propaganda. And no other group, no other ethnic group has been more exploited in this than the Black American community. Messages that weren't sent to the Black American community because they cared about whether or not we were anti-Zionists. They couldn't care less. They wanted to use the Black American community to make people think that somehow free Palestine was some sort of civil rights thing. That was the whole goal. So Yasser Arafat standing next to Louis Farrakhan, Yasser Arafat standing next to Jesse Jackson, and on and on. Why? Because the goal was make people think that free Palestine equates to we shall overcome, or civil rights, or voting rights, or anything that's not, or the apartheid state thing, right? Israel's apartheid. That's not an apartheid state. It's a lie. So those messages were sent, and they have been sent for decades. Is one of the examples. Fast forward to now, Ta-Nehisi Coates, who, to my knowledge, hasn't written a whole lot about geopolitical conflicts, but somehow needs to weigh in on the Israel-Palestine. I said the same thing about Glenn Lorry, who is a supposedly conservative economist, right? How many times on his show or in his writings does he talk about anything? Pakistan? I mean, anything international. Russia? Ukraine? No, but Coates writes an anti-Israel book, or parts of it, and then here comes Glenn Lorry. Oh, yeah, he's speaking his truth. Wow. Okay, I talked about that before on the other episodes. So here you have now Coates, nearly 30 years ago, not only knows about the trans-Saharan slave trade. Ladies and gentlemen, the trans-Saharan slave trade started back in the 7th century, shortly after the death of the Prophet Muhammad. And that's how Islam spread. There's one other thing I might do here. I forgot one thing just now, just hit me, but we'll see if we have time. That's how Islam spread. Islam spread through conquest and destruction, slavery, first and foremost from the deserts of Arabia, going west across Africa. That's why North Africa is Arabic today. Oh, those Christians, the Christians and the Crusades, and the Christians and the Christians in the slave trade, and the Christians are good. Yep, what you had in the transatlantic slave trade were Europeans working with African leaders and with Arab leaders to enslave Africans. Absolutely. The transatlantic slave trade ended in the 19th century. The trans-Saharan slave trade has not ended. Hence the slaves of Sudan, the slaves in Mauritania, the slaves in Qatar, the slaves in Saudi Arabia, and on and on and on. The slaves in Libya, the slaves in Algeria. That region has been enslaving Africans for 1,400 years and counting. So for especially a Black American, the Mark Lamont Hills, the Ta-Nehisi Coates, the Louis Farrakhan's to get up and blah, blah, Palestine this and blah, blah, Palestine that. And they all black, and we all with the Black and the African. You're right. Nothing to say about the enslavement and the genocide being perpetrated by Arab Islamists on Africans for millennia. Nothing. Coates learns about it in college. And according to what we've seen, has said nothing but has written about Palestine. Right? So a couple of weeks ago, on the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel leads what's called a Forum on Israel, Africa, and Black America. It's actually usually hosted by senior staff members Joshua Washington and Olga Mashway Washington. I join them every once in a while, but Joshua did a little clip, and I'm going to share with you here about the connection with the Farrakhan part, and he talks about the Iran part as well. So I need to show you that. Let's see if I can pull this up and not mess it up. Let's see.
This week, our CEO and founder, Pastor Dumisani Washington, he penned an article in our Substack, ibsi.substack.com. Africa Israel Weekly is the name of it. You see the QR code there. You can scan it. The article is called "The Iranian Regime's increased focus on Black Americans. We talked about it last week. There's a video, one of the Iranian officials talking to them about the importance of subverting America using the Black American population. But I want to talk about a different aspect, and that is Farrakhan's visit to Iran in 2018. There's an article that was penned from our friend Charles Jacobs in 2018, so the same year that Farrakhan went to Iran, from Tablet magazine. The article is called, "As Passover Nears, Let's Not Forget Farrakhan's Shameful Stance on Slavery." Finally, in March of 1996, Farrakhan was cornered at a news conference and asked about his stance on Sudanese slavery. Now, he was cornered by our friend Charles Jacobs. As reported in the New York Times, Farrakhan grew emotional. Where is proof?
If slavery exists, why don't you go as a member of the press and you look inside of the Sudan? And if you find it, then you come back and tell the American people what you have found.
And so the Baltimore Sun, they took up the challenge. He said the Baltimore Sun took up the challenge. They sent 2 reporters into Sudan where they bought 2 young African slave boys from an Arab middleman. The report ran as a series in the Sun and was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. A few months later, Dateline NBC ran a feature story on Sudan that included footage of slaves, raids, and middlemen. Host Jane Pauley introduced the segment, the first national television coverage of slavery from on the ground in Sudan, by playing a video clip of Farrakhan's angry challenge. Leaders of the South Sudanese people's struggle for liberation were not amused. Years before they had sought out Farrakhan and asked for his help, they reasoned that he, more than any other African American, could help them stand against the Arab onslaught and free Black slaves. In April of 1994, they met with him and got his promise that if he had to choose between his religion and his race, he would choose his race. He did not, and he does not. What everyone thinks about Farrakhan's role as a liberator of Black people, it ends at the water's edge. In Africa, for over 20 years, Louis Farrakhan has sided with those who have murderously oppressed Black people. In every African conflict that pits Blacks against Muslims, Farrakhan has sided with the Muslims or remained silent, even when Muslims were murdering Blacks, even when they enslaved Blacks. Even today, when Africans are slaves having been captured, bought, and sold by Muslims in Sudan, Mauritania, Libya, Nigeria, Farrakhan remains mum.
The article that's there, again, you can see the whole episode from IBC's forum, and that was a clip from it. And there, what you had was several different things. Let me make sure I can break it down for you. Charles Jacobs, the founder of the American Anti-Slavery Group, wrote an article for Tablet magazine back in 2018, which was, to our knowledge, our meaning public knowledge, Louis Farrakhan's last visit to where? The Islamic Republic of Iran. He walks in lockstep with the mullahs of Iran, the mullahs of Iran, who also, we talked about it a couple of episodes ago in the Truth is Power Live as well. We talked about the other article that we wrote that talks about how the Islamic leaders of Iran have been for decades, but even more so now than ever before, targeting who with disinformation? Black American leaders. Remember I said that before? It comes at the Black community, ladies and gentlemen, from a myriad of different directions. This is not a complaint. This is not some sort of victimization. This is the statement of reality. I'm going to go further than that. But again, you have to check it out. You have to do a little bit of homework here to understand that what we're talking about right now, we've been building on this in terms of information, receipts, real, where there's links to videos or links to documents, articles, so that you will know that all of this is not just talk. This is real. So while Louis Farrakhan was there in Iran back in 2018, he helped lead the chants, death to Israel, death to America. He said that he did it, but we have those videos as well. What does that have to do with anything? Let's connect some of these dots. The Islamic Republic of Iran, the mullahs target Black Americans with disinformation so that they can use the Black American community to convince people that Israel is an apartheid state, Israel committed genocide because they want to destroy Israel. They got that from the PLO that started doing that back in the 1960s. Stay with me. Louis Farrakhan not only tells lies about Israel, He also lies about what Islam is doing and has been doing to Africans for millennia. He traveled to Sudan, came back and told everybody there's no slavery in Sudan. You following me here? Charles Jacobs wrote about it because he confronted it. When Louis Farrakhan is talking about you go to the press, he's talking to Charles Jacobs. Charles Jacobs has actually asked the question about slavery in Africa, and Louis Farrakhan stands there at the mic and says there's no slavery in Africa. If there is, just a little bit. Lies. So he lies about Israel. See the connection here? Israel got nothing to do with the slave trade that's going on in Sudan and Mauritania. But what happens is that Israel's enemies, targeting the black community, tell them that Israel is racist and it's apartheid, blah, blah, all lies. And oh, by the way, the Islamic slave trade in Africa doesn't even exist. Everything's all good. You see the double lie there? See, Farrakhan's was a lie of commission. He knew he wasn't telling the truth. Coates was a lie of omission, because unless Ta-Nehisi Coates, who found out about the enslavement of Africans by Arab Islamists all over Africa back when he was a college student in Howard, unless he has addressed it, he lies by omission. Why? Because not only are you not going to speak to that, and you're concerned about oppression, and you're concerned about exploitation and imperialism and all those things, nothing about what's going on in Africa, and then you have the audacity and the unmitigated gall to call Israel an apartheid state. Israel's not an apartheid state. Hold on, bro. No, it's not an apartheid state. What about Mauritania? You learned about that in 1996. But Pastor Misani, you said it's not about them. It's not about them. You gotta. It's like a teaching. It's a sermon. It's a darash. Just stay with me. I had postulated years ago. I've shared this in lectures. I haven't written about this a whole lot. I shared this with other leaders. That it was around the 1990s that was the last time you ever heard concerted Black American voices where Africa was concerned. Remember, around there, I believe 94, is when Nelson Mandela, Nelson was elected the first Black president of South Africa. You had apartheid, and that became a global thing. The anti-apartheid movement, unfortunately, as legit as that movement was in terms of the oppression that was happening to the Black South Africans, as other people started using that for their own purposes as well. Hence the whole Israel apartheid state. Stay with me. I postulated then, years ago, that with the exception of Rwanda in 1994, the genocide of Rwanda in 1994, and then, of course, South Africa, there were no longer any Black American voices, organizations, I don't care, civil rights organization, NAACP, Urban League, no one was saying anything about Africa. It was as if it disappeared. And it's funny because it was during the Clinton administration, which I found out some things about that as well. Don't have time to get into that. But what went on policy-wise in terms of our foreign policy, how we were engaged with what was going on in like a Sudan, and then we changed for our own purposes. But when I saw the video of Ta-Nehisi Coates as a college student learning about it, as he said, for the first time, and was surprised, but his silence, that's that leftist agenda thing. See, one of the main reasons, other than the fact that many don't know, one of the main reasons why the Black intellectual and political voice has been muted where Africa is concerned, like things like the slave trade. Remember Boko Haram? I told you before, that's on another episode as well. Bring back our girls. Michelle Obama holds up a sign, bring back our girls, and then just kind of disappeared because the Obama administration was the one actually helping Boko Haram to grow. Hillary Clinton, the then Secretary of State, refused to allow Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan to declare Boko Haram a terrorist organization. And then the subsequent Secretary of State, John Kerry, said that they were violating Boko Haram's human rights by killing them, right? The Obama administration ran interference for Boko Haram and then acted like, oh my God, oh my girls, I'll bring back my girls. All a lie. But that was 2014, 2013, 14, right around there. But what before then, though? Because the Black voice where Africa is concerned was already gone up pause. If you're a Black American watching this and like, I don't care about Africa, then I'm not talking to you. I'm not talking to you. What happens in Africa doesn't make any difference. You're wrong, but I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the people like Ta-Nehisi Coates I'm talking people like Mark Lamont Hill. I'm talking to the other black men and women who go, oh, free Palestine. And I'm black, and the black folks, the black struggle and the struggle and the revolutionary struggle. Right. Okay. So I'm talking to that generation in particular. The silence around the Arab Islamic enslavement, genocide, and displacement up to the millions of Africans, and by now for millennia, shows the moral cowardice and the enslavement of the mind to the progressive agenda that sees that somehow, if you talk about what's going on with Arab Islam and the enslavement of Africa, it's somehow Islamophobic. It's stupid, but it's also demonic. Because while we're wringing our hands about the right term to use, these people are still being slaughtered and enslaved by the millions. And folks who stand up, who act like they have consciousness, who think that they're, especially if they consider themselves even remotely Afrocentric, say nothing. Why? Because the white liberal establishment doesn't want you to say anything. For all of your wokeness, for all of your independence of thought, you bow down to the altar of white progressivism because you refuse to tell the truth about what's going on, even if an African tells you himself. That's already bad. But then they grab the Palestinian flag. I gotta, you know what? Black folk who shill for the Palestine narrative have a Stockholm syndrome issue. I wish I could. You know what? This is live. So I'm gonna, while I'm talking to you, there was a video that my son Joshua did. Like, he's the president, he's the executive director of Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel. Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel. I know I'm talking fast. And I didn't pull it up. And I should have. My apologies, because it just hit me that I wanted to show something to you. And then it hit me that as we got started, I said, oh, I don't have it on there. I thought I had it. I don't seem to have it. I'll have to. Of course, if I do a clip of this, I can just put it in there and show it that way. But there's a I won't have to use it, but I have to do the description form here. It's on our social media. It's on IPSI's social media. It might be on TTP Live social media as well. And that is a quick video. Joshua addresses the whole Black for Palestine thing and the free Palestine, free Sudan, free. They're trying to lump all these things together as if Israel is oppressing the Arab Palestinian people. Just not. And in the video, he showed a clip of, he didn't show all the gruesomeness of it, but you saw enough. And I really wish I wish I had it at my fingertips. I don't know why it's not where I thought it was. I had the video. Let me I'm gonna check one other thing, right? Because I wanna, if I can show it to you, I want you to see it yourself. And again, my apologies. I'm doing this kind of impromptu. I'm doing this very extemporaneously, and I just for some reason I don't see it. I don't see what I'm looking for. I want to show you that video. Yeah, I wish I could find it. I'm sorry, my apologies. But it's the death. There's a Joshua Malau and a Clemens Matenga. They are two Tanzanian, East African agricultural students who were among the hundreds that are there in Israel, were there on October the 7th, 2023, were captured by Hamas and slaughtered. Joshua's, the young man who was killed, my son's Joshua is another Joshua. We have his murder on video that the Hamas and these other Palestinians from Gaza took on their GoPro cameras and shared it on social media. They're yelling at this young man. They're calling him all kind of names in Arabic. And then they stab him. He dies, shoot him, and then they shoot him some more after his dead body is on the ground. And Joshua, my son, explains, this is what Arab Islamists think about Black people. You're either good for genocide or slavery or displacement. So when I hear all this Black for Palestine garbage and Israel's apartheid state garbage, right? Not only are these things lies, it is the epitome of cowardice. That if you're fine, you don't want to say anything about the enslavement of Africans throughout the Arab Muslim world, fine. Then shut up about Israel if you're going to lie about what's going on. You're not a brave person. You are a coward. And what happened was this. Remember the spiritual part? Oh, let's bring it home. There has been this powerful affinity for all things Israel in the Black American community since slavery. This is why the Negro spirituals are set in Scripture, but particularly in the Old Testament. Go down Moses, Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, swing low, sweet chariot, Eliyahu, Elijah rock, shout. Daniel, did my Lord deliver Daniel? On and on. These were songs of hope and strength of Black Africans in the diaspora as slaves here in the New World. It wasn't just stories and fables. They were calling on the God of Israel to deliver them from bondage the way he delivered the Hebrews in Egypt. Harriet Tubman, one of the most famous abolitionists, they called her Black Moses. Not only that, years later, Zionism became synonymous in the Black community with rebuilding, with moving forward, coming from out of the ashes. Even Marcus Garvey, his movement was called Black Zionism, a return to Africa with industry and agency. And none of this is new. So that in the 60s, when Israel's enemies start to attempt to foment anti-Semitism within the Black community and drag the Arab-Israeli conflict into it, the rabbis who were working with Dr. King were perplexed because they knew full well what Jew hatred was, but they had never seen it in any type of substantive form come out of the Black community. It was foreign to them. They even asked Dr. King, they said, what's happening here? The PLO, along with Yasser Arafat, the Arab League, these different players are reaching into the Black community, trying to find leaders and convince them that the civil rights struggle in the United States had a parallel out there in the Middle East in which these white Jews were now beating up these brown Arabs. All of that was a distortion, but it was to sell a narrative. 50, almost 60 years later, the narrative worked. Not so much on the Black community. We talked about how that community was used, but look at the college students who are part of these Hamas encampments, who are bowing down on their prayer rugs to Allah. And all the vast majority of them, ladies and gentlemen, are not Black. They're white. Some of them are Jewish, right? That's how the game worked. It wasn't for the Black community. So I often tell people this, the anti-Semitism in Black community, I understand that. And here are some of the reasons why. How about the Jew hatred on all these college campuses, particularly in the Ivy League? How is that the Black? It's not the HBCUs that are on fire. I've been saying this for you. It's not the HBCU. Don't get me wrong. There's a pro-Palestinian presence on some of the HBCUs, but all this stuff where Jews are getting beat up and Jewish teachers are being accosted, that's not happening at the HBCUs. That's happening on these white progressive campuses. And it's only getting worse. Yep. The reason why, other than just the irony of it, we look at this video from almost 30 years ago when a young Ta-Nehisi Coates becomes aware of the Islamic slave trade of Africans, but never says anything about it to our knowledge, right? But then wants to come for Israel, is because he had only fallen into what the vast majority of the Black American leaders had. It was very difficult. To this day, in the Democrat Party, Congressman Richie Torres, much respect, much admiration. My man out there doing his thing, stands with Israel, stands flat-footed, gets all kinds of stuff thrown at him. But you'd be hard-pressed to find 5 other Black Democrats who have anything close to that level of courage. But that was not the case 40 years ago. Bayard Rustin, Dr. King's a longtime friend and colleague, A. Philip Randolph, they all started an organization in 1975 called BASIC, Black Americans to Support Israel Committee. Politicians are part of it, educators, entertainers, athletes. Ralph Abernathy is part of it. The Lionel Hampton, the musician, is the treasurer. I mean, you have who's who of the Black community standing flat-footed, leaders in all kinds of different areas, standing with Israel. Fast forward to now. Not does that not happen broadly, but the silence around Africa. Here's the Islamists that are enslaving and killing Africans are the same Islamists that are killing Israelis. Hamas, Boko Haram, Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, put them all in a bag and shake them up. They are all Islamic terrorists who want to destroy Jews, Christians, and other Muslims who are not down with their idiocy. And what you have is the silence in the West, afraid to call it out. Why? Oh, because Islamophobia. That's what's going on. And it was captured first in the Black community. When Louis Farrakhan came back from Sudan and said, there's no slavery, even the facilitators of that forum that we talked about at Howard, if you go back and look at the whole video, and it's on YouTube, if you just Google anti-Israel slavery group, put in Charles Jacobs, put in Howard University, it'll come up. The anti-Israel slavery group has its own YouTube page. It's there. The whole video is about an hour and a half, hour and 40 minutes. And one of the things that happens is the moderator gives a disclaimer that Howard takes no position on slavery. And one of the reasons we surmise Howard said that is because Louis Farrakhan had just before come back and said there's no slavery in Sudan. His words rang so strong that young Ta-Nehisi Coates student got to the microphone and specifically asked about what Farrakhan is saying, while he's looking at the Africans on the panel who are telling him the truth. This young man was probably somewhat flummoxed. He sure got over it because we don't see any record of him ever discussing it. The other thing I want to talk about in the spiritual part of it. One of the reasons why the teaching part of what we all do, and I can speak now for Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel, Truth Power Live, is that the younger minds need to hear the truth, even as difficult as it may be, so that they can chart their course. Who knew that young Ta-Nehisi Coates there in the room was going to go on to world fame as an author? But that's just it. When you're talking to young people, all my rabbi friends, all my pastor friends, all my imam friends, all my teacher friends, you don't know who you're talking to. You don't know what path God has for that young man or young woman to become the next prime minister or president of a nation, become a security chief of somebody else's nation. You don't know who these people are. And you training them up, and that's not just for parents in the way that they should go, understanding who they are and pouring knowledge into them, objective, not that subjective crap that we're getting here. Our kids can't read, but they're being taught all kinds of stuff about you can transition from girl to boy at 5 years old. That's why the West is losing it. You're not even telling them facts, and you're going to sit there and play make-believe stuff with them. This is what's actually going on. You don't know who you may be talking to. You don't know the calling. I'm intrigued by the fact that the Bible often likens our life to path. There's often path, right? He leads me on paths of righteousness for his name's sake, right? Psalm 23. Trust in the Lord with all thy heart, lean not to thy own understanding, Proverbs 3. In all thy ways acknowledge him, he will direct your paths, right? The steps of the righteous man are ordered by the Lord. Often the Bible, and many different analogies, one of those seemingly most consistent is path. You don't know someone's path. We don't really always know our own. We have a glimpse of it, but you know who does? God. God is the one who has set your path. He's the one that's given you the gifts, the talents, and the abilities, and he sees your end from the beginning, which is why Moshe said in Psalm 90, so teach us to number our days that we may apply our hearts to wisdom. It is the teacher's job, the rabbi's job, the pastor's job to pour knowledge and then do that with wisdom into these young people so that they can walk their path. It is amazing the moment we find ourselves in now. I want to say this one last thing about the Africa part, I think, because some of this I'm going to have to resume next time. Well, two things. Number one, I'll tell you about the articles. If you haven't already, you can subscribe on Africa, for Africa, Israel Weekly, because the next article coming up, which will drop tomorrow, will be entitled Ta-Nehisi Coates, Farrakhan, and Black Apologists for Islamic Slavery and Genocide in Africa. You can go to ibsi.org, click on Africa Israel Weekly so you can subscribe to the Substack, or go to ibsi.substack.com. It's not out yet. It'll drop sometime late morning East Coast tomorrow. You can also go to ibsi.org. You can join the newsletter because it'll be sent there as a link to that newsletter, as well as a couple of other comments about the work of the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel, which this is not. This is a separate thing. But again, this is where they meld. Again, the name of the article that's coming on Monday, December the 2nd, is Ta-Nehisi Coates, Farrakhan, and Black Apologists for Islamic Slavery and Genocide in Africa. A couple of weeks ago in our time in Shabbat and looking at the scriptures, I've done this before, but with some of them on the East Coast, we talked about the prophetic call on Africa. I've preached it before. There's a prophetic call on Africa to lead the nations to Zion. I had the honor of preaching that our friend Bishop Paul Lanier's church, Hope Community Church. Shout out to Hope Community out there in, not Winston-Salem. Winston-Salem. Whew, I remember it. Thank you, God. Winston-Salem, North Carolina, not too far from where we are out here in Charlotte, in the Charlotte area. And we talked about that call that was in Psalm 68:31. Princes shall come out of Egypt. Ethiopia shall soon stretch her hand to God. How the queen of Ethiopia, Makeda, came and brought that gift, stretched out her hands to God. How Jesus in the New Testament, Matthew chapter 17, I believe it is, references the Queen of Sheba's visit to Solomon. How these were prophetic moves. The Ethiopian Jew who actually leaves Jerusalem in Acts chapter 8, headed on back to Ethiopia, and he meets Philip, one of the apostles, and he becomes a follower of Jesus at that point, gets baptized in water, everything. There's this recurring theme that's there. I'm saying this for a reason. There's a call on Africa, like it's a prophetic call. And it's amazing that at this time, not only are African economies beginning to rise, a lot of struggles that are there, but I told you already that there's going to be the largest number of Christians. The Christian population will be in Africa in just a little while. And they are the most ardent supporters of Israel. They are Christian Zionists to the hilt. They're some of the most committed Christians. There's a mantle being passed. There's a role then that Black Americans, the most powerful Africans in the diaspora, are to play. Some will never recognize it. It's that's a thing, and we'll have to have that conversation. I got to have Pastor Shagan on here. I got to have Professor Anton Brown. I got to, because we need to break this down for the people. I don't have time to get into it now. But when you see the deception, the manipulation, or the rank ignorance from some Black American leaders who then attack Israel fraudulently and then shill for the Islamic destruction of Africans, you can see the opposite of what that actual call is supposed to be. It's actually the opposite of what's supposed to be happening. There are many reasons why this is such an important moment here. Now I'm talking about spiritually, I'm talking about the prophetic now. And again, we're going to have a separate show about that. We'll talk about the whole princes shall come out of Egypt. We have to talk about the whole Africa marching to Zion. We're going to have that conversation for another time. But suffice to say for now, because we got to wrap this up, suffice to say for now that those who are coming against Israel and ignoring what's actually going on because the Islamic destruction, it's here. The Muslim Brotherhood and all of its groups on the college campuses and throughout government, the mindset is the same. They are using the Black community, as is Iran, for its purposes. And when they're done, what happened to those young men, the Tanzanian men in Israel? That's exactly what they have in store. When I'm done with y'all Black folks, this is what I'm getting ready to do with you. You're going to be slaves, I'm going to slaughter you. There's a whole lot of wake up that needs to happen right into here. I'm going to stop here because I don't want to show that other thing. I'm not going to do that now. And I always love doing it live. Someone said, "Oh, don't do it live." But no, I always prefer to do it live. So you're getting it live. It will be up on the website, ttplive.com. If you go to ttplive.com, you'll see all the podcasts 1 through 23. If you click on listen to all the episodes, check all those out there. Again, there'll be more information here. Again, the article that's coming out, this latest part, it's actually that Ta-Nehisi Coates and Farrakhan article. That's actually a part 2 of the other Ta-Nehisi Coates, because we're breaking this down. We'll probably have some clips on there from the show as well. All right. So check those things out. There's a lot of good things that happen as well. You all, but there's so much. I had to give you some of this whole thing and why it's so important, that we understand some of the fear that people are experiencing and speaking the truth. And listen, speak the truth. Tell the truth. Tell the truth in as much as in your power to do so. Walk in the truth. Goodness gracious. Let everything else take care of itself. It absolutely will. Being with you all. I hope you have a great week. It's the last month of the year, everyone. And a great holiday season as well. See you next week.
Truth to Power Live with Jimmy Study Washington.